Fire Charger's Dark Blade here, and in this video we will be reacting to the list of largest empires article on Wikipedia, specifically this section, largest empires by land area, subsection, empires at their greatest extent. The percent is of the land area of the planet minus Antarctica, and I have this organized by time. So starting off is the Old Kingdom of Egypt at 0.15 square million square kilometers, or 0.15 million square miles, or 400,000 square kilometers. That's moderate amounts bigger than the state of Arizona. By the way, the Old Kingdom is when all the major pyramids were built. And they built those using Bronze Age technology. They didn't use wheels, horses, or iron tools, or aliens, or dinosaurs, or Pokemon. Next up is Lagash, which is very small compared to the Old Kingdom of Egypt. And Sumer, this is, when I read this earlier today, I was genuinely surprised by just how small Sumer turned out to be. I think this is smaller than Arizona, and let me go, but it is twice as big as Massachusetts. I think it's Then there's the Akkadian Empire, and dated to about 2250 BC for the greatest extent. The Akkadian Empire was the one that the famous Sargon of Akkad ruled, I think, around 2300 BC, and he expanded it so great that as a result, Akkadian was the lingua franca of the ancient Near East for the next 1600 years until about 700 BC. And the language that, foreign diplomacy with Egypt was conducted in about 700 BC, shortly before Aramaic started to gradually replace Akkadian as the lingua franca of the ancient Near East. Next is the Neo-Sumerian Empire. I have not heard about this one before today, reading this article earlier today, and I don't know anything about it. So it looks like just the Sumerian Empire, but revamped and twice as big as the other previous Sumerian Empire. That's an improvement. Now there's the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, specifically 1850 BC. I think that's the late 12th dynasty. The Middle Kingdom Egyptian pyramids are not as big as the Old Kingdom pyramids, and they're built out of a different material, because building the Old Kingdom big stone pyramids was just no longer economically feasible. Then there's the Xia dynasty. When I first heard of this dynasty, I think in either 5th or 6th grade, it was said that there was no archaeological or historical evidence for its existence, but apparently it's real enough and substantiated enough to be included here. And it's moderately big, and the Middle Kingdom of Egypt was bigger than the Old Kingdom, so maybe they expanded a bit wider or into a bit more into the area that's south of Egypt. So 1800 BC for the Xia dynasty was founded in 2070 BC and kept on going until 1600 BC. Then there's the Indus Valley Civilization, which was present in India. Its area is about 120,000 square miles, which is similar to that of the state of Arizona. Next is Larsa. I'm actually surprised it's on its list. Sure, I've heard about it before, but I haven't heard much about it. And it's moderately big. It's still like about a third of Arizona's area. I honestly don't even know where Larsa is. I think it's either in Anatolia or Mesopotamia. Next, the Old Assyrian Empire. This 1730 BC, which is about 50% larger than Larsa. Next is the First Babylonian Empire, which is actually 250,000 square kilometers. This is the area that Hammurabi ruled, and the date is just a couple of decades after Hammurabi died. Then the Hyksos. These were like foreign Semitic people who ruled Egypt from about 1650 to 1530 BC. Of course, in that later part, like 1550 to 1530, they were gradually being vanquished by the native Egyptians. In fact, the Hyksos dynasty is most likely the one that Joseph served under. The old Hittite Empire that's there, and honestly, this size is very surprising, how big the Hyksos were. The old Hittite Empire, then there's the Middle Hittite Empire, so maybe just a difference in who was in charge. Oh, this is the Middle Hittite Kingdom. It's been about 80 years. The Mitanni, they were a force in, I think, the northern Mesopotamia and they were a major player during the 15th century BC. They were like at war with Egypt from about 1490 BC until Amenhotep II of Egypt signed a peace treaty with them about 1416 BC in his 9th regnal year. So that's almost 75 years. Then there's the New Kingdom of Egypt, which is very great territorial expansion. And the number given is 1450 BC. That's like Mid-Tutmosis III, or 1300 BC. That's like early Seti I. The New Hittite Kingdom, which is basically the Hittites that were contemporaneous with the 19th dynasty of Egypt. These were the ones that Ramesses II fought against, and they were in Anatolia, like all the other Hittite iterations. Then there's the Empire of Elam, which I'm honestly surprised that it's this late in here, 1160 BC. The second dynasty of Isin, also surprised at how late it was. They ruled in Mesopotamia, and I think Elam was in southwest Iran. The Shang dynasty, that's the ones that replaced the Xia dynasty in China. They kept going until about 1046 BC. Then there's the Zhou dynasty. Wait, I thought the Zhou dynasty came into power in 1046 BC. This doesn't make any sense. Anyway, it was apparently less than half as big as the Shang dynasty. Then there's the Middle Assyrian Empire. I don't know about that or that. And apparently the Zhou dynasty fragments or something. The 25th dynasty of Egypt. I think that's the Kushite dynasty. The Neo-Assyrian Empire. This is like when the famous Assyrian kings Assurbanipal, Esarhaddon, Shalmaneser, Tiglath-Pileser, and Sargon, like the first, the second. It was quite big. And there's the Median Empire, which is double that. Lydia, Neo-Babylonian Empire, time of Nebuchadnezzar's death. They actually conquered the Assyrian Empire, though apparently held less lands than it, because at one point the Assyrians also conquered Egypt and the Babylonians just didn't. Then there's the 26th dynasty of Egypt. I think that was like set up by the Assyrians or something. And it was actually bigger than the Babylonians. No wonder it was able to keep them out from conquering them. Then some more ones I haven't heard of. Then there's the Achaemenid Empire, which is really big. This is around, the time is about midway through Darius the First. Scythia, I think that's around the Black Sea. By the way, I haven't heard of Phrygia either. The Macedonian Empire, which, despite conquering the Achaemenid Empire, actually was smaller than it. This was during the time of Alexander the Great, and it fragments immediately after his death. And two of the parts are the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires mentioned here. Now, 301 BC, I think that at that time the Ptolemaic Empire still had control of the lands of Israel, and the Seleucids would gain it later. So I don't know why they're listed so much bigger here. Maybe they just had a lot of land in the eastern parts like Iraq and Iran, and lost that at some later points before they gained Israel. And just lost that at some point. State of Chinese state, a great empire that conquered almost all of India except the Tamil empires. That's where the first king Chandragupta Maurya was back in like 300 BC. This is either during him or some time after his death. The Qin dynasty, the first imperial dynasty of China. Carthage, like, Hannibal. I think it was mainly just some stuff around North Africa and Spain. The Eastern Maurya Empire was quite big. Eastern Maurya Kingdom, haven't heard of. The Greco-Bactrian Kingdom, yeah. Now, when I read this earlier today, the Xiongnu Empire are at 9% really surprised me. I mean, at 9 million square kilometers really surprised me. Then there's the Eastern Greek, Indo-Greek Kingdom, Western Han Dynasty, Xin Dynasty, then eventually the Xiongnu fragments. This thing called the Indo-Scythian Kingdom exists. Now we're, by the way, from the Parthian Empire that was like in Persia. The Western satraps didn't know what that is. The Roman Empire in 117 AD. By the way, don't ask me how often I think about it. Then there's Xianbei, I think that's in China. Kushan, don't know what that is. Eastern Wu, China. Shuhan, Chaowei, Western Jin, I think they're China. The Huns are in Eastern Europe, around And here that's the late 3rd century, so still before Attila the Hun. In fact, it wasn't until very recently that I actually knew when Attila the Hun lived. Then there's some more Chinese states. The Kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia. More Chinese. The Western Roman Empire after the permanent split in 395. Some stuff. This is the Gupta Empire. I think it was founded by a king whose first name was Chandra, not to be confused with the earlier Chandragupta. So this is about the 5th century. Then there's the Hunnic Empire, or I think this is Attila the Hun, about still Eastern Europe. More Chinese states, one I haven't heard of. The Liang Dynasty, I think that's another Chinese state. The Sasanian Empire, that's in Persia, and was quite big. The Byzantine Empire, and the figure that it wants to say there's a discrepancy of over 100 years. The First Turkic Khaganate. I haven't heard of these Chinese states before. The Visigothic Kingdom, I think that's in Spain, and I don't think it's big enough to be included. I personally don't find it big enough to be included here. Warrants inclusion here. Sui Dynasty in China, Avar, I don't know. Eastern Turkic Khaganate, apparently the Turkic Khaganate fragments around the 6th or 7th century. Haven't heard of this. Maybe another fragment. The Rashidun Caliphate in the 7th century, during the time under the personal leadership of Muhammad. The Muslim community manages to conquer and unite almost all of Arabia, and during the succeeding Rashidun caliphs, new territory would be incorporated into that, like the territory of Persia, Iran, or Iraq, either then or already during the time of Muhammad. There was also Israel, Jordan, Yemen, Oman, the UAE, Kuwait, and I think Qatar and Bahrain, but I haven't researched this. The Tang Dynasty in China is also then eventually the people in charge of the Muslim community changes. The Umayyad Caliphate takes this even farther by taking over a lot of Spain and North Africa. Then the Abbasid Caliphate lists the exact same numbers just 30 years later. Guess it was just a change of who was in charge. Then there's the Emirate of Cordoba, that's the territories in Spain apparently becoming their own separate independent Muslim political entity. The Tibetan Empire and Uyghur Khaganate, those I think are in western China and also parts of other neighboring countries in the 8th century. Then there's Francia, that's the next one I've actually heard of. This is about the time that Charlemagne dies. It had parts of France, Italy, Germany, and Switzerland, I think. The Bulgarian Empire. In fact, the Cyrillic alphabet was actually invented in the First Bulgarian Empire. So there's the Khazar Khanate. Apparently, during its time, there was a point where the nobility converted to Judaism. That's not something that typically happens in history, but it happened this time, and they are not the ancestors of most Jews or even most Ashkenazis. Ashkenazi Jews. They just aren't. That's some weird anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Then there's the Liao dynasty. I think, is that the one that spoke that Mongolic Khitan language? And there's Fatimid Caliphate, don't know what that is. The Kievan Rus start appearing about the 10th century in this list. The Caliphate of Cordoba, apparently Cordoba upgraded what it wants to be called and got a little bit bigger. Then there's the Ghaznavid Empire, I think that's in Persia. The Holy Roman Empire, that's in Central Europe, basically the area of Germany and and areas of neighboring countries. The Great Seljuk Empire was in Turkey, I think, according to Bill Wirt's History of the World, I guess they were the main significant part in the lead up to the First Crusade, where the Byzantine Empire, who was worried about being eaten up by the Seljuks, called the Pope to ask for help and also retake the land of Israel, because the Jin Dynasty, 1126. I want to scroll. Then there's the Khwarezmian Empire that was in Persia. I've heard from a few places that at the Mongol conquest of the Khwarezmian Empire was like so devastating that Persia's population didn't fully recover from it until the 20th century, but I don't know if that's actually true. And there's the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages. And there's the Mongol Empire, that's the one led by Genghis Khan, though it fragments some number of decades after his death. The Khmer Empire, that's in the mainland portion of Southeast Asia, where Cambodia is. The Mamluks, those were in control of Egypt. And the Mongol Empire is also the biggest thing that we've seen since, the Abbasid Caliphate. The Yuan Dynasty, Golden Horde Khanate, Il Khanate, and Chagatai Khanate were the fragments of the Mongol Empire. The Yuan Dynasty was in China. Delhi Sultanate, that was, I think, India, yeah. The Mali Empire, West Africa, one of its kings was said to be the richest person to have ever lived. The Timurid Empire, well, now I know it was around the year 1400, but I still don't know where it was. I think it was in Asia, but I don't know anything else. The Ming Dynasty of China, after the Mongols are kicked out. Actually quite decently big. It's more than 2 Arizonas. Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. I think that's Poland, Lithuania, and parts of other neighboring countries. The Aztec and Inca empires, both of which would cease to exist shortly after the cited dates. And the Aztec Empire is basically around where Mexico and Central America, and the Inca Empire is South America and the Andes regions. The Songhai Empire, I think that's West Africa. The first Portuguese Empire, that's Portugal itself, and I think the Algarves, and some parts of Brazil and French trading colonies in Africa. In fact, it's around the 16th century that the triangle trade that leads to the transatlantic slave trade begins. Europeans would come down to Africa, sell some stuff, buy some stuff in return. A lot of the times, the stuff they would be buying are slaves. Take that stuff to North and South America, sell it to the people there, sell it to their colonists living there, and buy the stuff they were producing, I think, tobacco and sugar, and bring it back to Europe. The Safavid Empire, which is actually, I think that's Iran, quite big, about the size of Arizona. And apparently, I now know it was the 16th century. The Iberian Union, that's when like Spain, Portugal, and their colonial holdings at the time become one country. Though the year cited is the last year because soon, Portugal becomes independent again. Spain actually had a lot. There's some colonization in the Caribbean islands in the tail end of the 15th century, but it starts to really pick up. But the Spanish Empire starts really picking up in the 16th century. The first French colonial empire, 1670. France and England joined the colonization game in the 17th century AD, and France actually gets quite a lot. By the mid 18th century, they have Canada, a significant chunk of America that corresponds to around between the Missouri River and the Appalachian Mountains. They also have Haiti, and I think French Guiana, though I don't know when they gain that. Though they lose basically all of that except Haiti and French Guiana in 1763. They gain some of it back in 1800, but lose it again in just a few short years. So in 1800, they gain back what they gave to Spain in 1763, so that's between the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, but then they sell that to the US in, 1803, after they lose Haiti. And eventually they turn up to go to Algeria and the area of Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. And there's this. So, some things I haven't heard of. Then there's the Ottoman Empire. They ruled Turkey, but they also had some stuff in North Africa, Southeastern Europe, and other stuff in West Asia. The Mughal Empire, those were in North India. The Danish Empire, I know they had, other than Denmark, they also had Norway, Sweden, and Iceland. And they keep Norway until 1814. The Swedish Empire, at this point, it had like Sweden and Finland, I think. And it loses Finland shortly after the cited date. The Qing dynasty of China, not to be confused with Qin, this is Qing. I probably didn't get the tones right. I would if I had pinyin right in front of me. The cited year is 1790, so still a good amount of far away from the century of humiliation begin. The next one I've heard of is the Spanish Empire in 1810. Strange it took them this long to cite the Spanish Empire. Let me go through the Spanish Empire. So So in like the 1490s, they get some islands in the Caribbean. In 1521, they get Mexico and Central America. 15 in like 1533, they get a bunch of South America. 1580, temporarily get more of South America by owning in Brazil through Portugal, and they also get the Philippines in about 1565. Then they lose Portugal and Brazil in 1640. The next one, and they also, what else happens? They lose Gibraltar in 1700, though they actually gain a lot. They gain like the Western Louisiana Territory from the Missouri to Mississippi in 1763, though they lose Florida. They gain Florida back in 1783, and they give their part of Louisiana back to France in 1800. So if you wanted to cite the Spanish Empire, I think that time between 1763 I think that time between in 1783 and 1800 would be the best part, where it's had like it's holding where it had its part in Louisiana, the Western U.S., Mexico, Central America, its parts of the Caribbean and a lot of South America, and the Philippines and Florida. I think that's the best time you could cite the Spanish Empire. And of course, it was very big. The first French Empire, 1813. This is like a year before Napoleon. Defeat. Let me see. It doesn't have Haiti or what's it called, Louisiana anymore. Then again, it lost Haiti and Louisiana before it technically became the first French Empire. So all it has is like what, maybe Italy and some stuff like Réunion and Mayotte and French Guiana. I don't really know. Next is the Second Portuguese Empire, where they have like Brazil, the Algarves, are in Portugal, though they only have like half of Brazil, and France doesn't get what is it called, Algeria until 1830, Indochina until the 1850s. The first Mexican Empire in 1821. Yeah. And by the way, the Spanish Empire cited date 1810. They actually lose a significant amount in a rather short amount of time after that cited date. First, I think if they're citing this, then this might be during the time when Mexico also ruled over the Federation of Central America. I think that's what it's called. This Zulu Empire, that's in southern Africa. Sikh Empire, that's North India. Qajar Empire, that's like area of Iran. Empire of Brazil. After Brazil becomes independent, it starts to take on more land until it actually has all of Brazil and bigger than Portugal was when Portugal still had its part of Brazil. Now, 1895, the Russian Empire was actually quite big, bigger than the Soviet Union. It had some stuff that even the Soviet Union didn't have, like it had a large chunk of Poland. The Third Portuguese Empire, its colonies in Africa are basically the only reason it even still existed, and those are, let me try to remember. I think they're Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, and Sao Tome and Principe. The Austro-Hungarian Empire included Austria and Hungary, but also Czechia, Slovakia, Slovenia, Romania, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and part of Romania and like the western fringe of Ukraine. And fun fact, shortly after the cited date, it would the Austro-Hungarian Empire would completely cease to exist. This is the German colonial empire, which is Germany and also the southern half of Papua New Guinea, some islands in the Pacific that Japan would, and also some islands in the Pacific that Japan would seize during World War I, and also German possessions in Africa. I think they were Tanzania, Namibia, and Cameroon, along with some others I don't remember right now. And they also had a good chunk of Poland. Oh yeah, Austria-Hungary also had a good chunk of Poland. After 1795, Poland just ceased to exist as an independent country until 1918. This is the British Empire in 1920. And see, this was before the decolonization of Africa and the British Raj. So it still had a lot of, so it still had that, it still had its lands in Africa. It had the lands that it got from Germany, so Tanzania. And I think either it or Australia got, what is it called? The German New Guinea. And this is also before the Westminster Declaration that gave the other dominions like South Africa, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand the right to pursue their own foreign policies, so I don't know if they are or aren't being counted in this figure. The Second French Colonial Empire. France now has, was it called, Algeria, that it got in 1830. It has, oh yeah, and Germany, and also Britain has Myanmar. So the Second French Colonial Empire, and this is the biggest number on this here. Second French Colonial Empire, 1920. France has Algeria, which it got in 1830. It has Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, which it got in the 1850s, I think. It has the African land it got in the 1880s. That's Morocco, Guinea, Senegal, I think. Mali, Algeria, and one of the two Congos, and some other stuff I'm not remembering, and and Djibouti, and it also got Cameroon from Germany after World War One, because after World War one of the terms was that Germany wasn't allowed to keep any of its colonies anymore. The Dutch Empire, which people kind of forget about the existence of, the Dutch East India Company took over Indonesia in the 17th century, I think. And eventually the Dutch nation personally took over operations from that. Indonesia would eventually become independent in 1948, I think. after brief Japanese occupation during the Second World War. So the Dutch Empire cited here, its greatest territorial extent is like during the last few years that it spends still existing. Then there's the Italian Empire, 1941. At this point, Italy has Italy itself, and what else? It also has Somalia, and Libya that it gained in the 1880s, and in 1935, it also took over and conquered Ethiopia, and it also has Eritrea, and maybe Albania, but I don't know. Okay, Google. When did Italy take over Albania?
According to Wikipedia, in spite of Albania's long-standing alliance with Italy, on the 7th of April 1939, Italian troops invaded Albania, 5 months before the start of the Second World War. The Albanian armed resistance proved ineffective against the Italians and, after a short defense, the country was occupied.
So, basically, Italian land in Africa is the reason why this number is so big. And there's Nazi Germany during World War II. Basically, it has, I think it's only covering European territory, not the stuff that Rommel did and it over in North Africa. So by this point, the Blitzkrieg has several European countries have fallen victim to it. Austria was annexed in 1938. So basically, half of Poland, Germany had taken over in like the first part of World War II. It also blitzkrieg like the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Belgium, Denmark, and Norway. And what else? Some places in the it also took France. Though there was a free France, there was a Vichy France, and there was a France that was directly occupied different parts of France. And they also had activities in Greece out and Yugoslavia, though I don't know and they also, but I don't know when those were. I think Yugoslavia was in 1941, and 1941 is also the year that they go after, or the Soviet Union after Germany fails its air raid on Britain. So they also go after the USSR and, by extension, the half of Poland that it took. Then there's the Belgian colonial empire, which I think is around is just the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Oh wait, I remember. France also had Burkina Faso, Togo, and Benin, I think. And Cote d'Ivoire. Then there's the Empire of Japan, which controlled a lot. It had a lot of land in eastern China. It also had, and by the way, it would also, by the way, Nazi Germany would completely cease to exist 4 years after the cited date, as would mostly the Japanese Empire, which now just consists of Japan, but during this cited period had a bunch of lands in eastern China since the 1930s, all of Taiwan since 1895, all of Korea since 1910, and it had also taken various parts of Southeast Asia during the Second World War, like Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. I don't know when Myanmar was occupied. There was also Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, Singapore, and the Philippines. So that's all for this section.